All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, and yeah, happy to introduce to you Noxtua, especially a legal AI model which we trained, and yeah, where we address a couple of the problems that were also mentioned before, for example, also by Maria. And yeah, I guess we directly jump into it. I just have to. Ah, yeah. So, one second. All right. Yeah, so very briefly about Xayn. So yeah, we are actually founded as a research company, and yeah, over time developed more and more towards developing these language models, and yeah, very much focus also on the topics of privacy and sovereignty. But let's start with the actual problem that we address. We see mostly two things, and they were actually also covered before to some extent, but I want to address this a bit more in detail. The first problem that we see, and Maria also went quite deeply into that topic, is actually the legal competence of the models that we have available by the market, like ChatGPT, like open source models, for example, Mistral, which usually and predominantly are trained on English data and also especially on English law, or UK law, US law, etc. Because this data is just much more available, and most of the German data, for example, or Italian data, etc., is not really available for training. And that is, of course, a huge problem because these models usually act more like, let's say, an American lawyer talking in German. And that is, of course, quite a problem if you really want to apply these models on German settings. So we see really a huge problem in the incompetence when it comes to the German law and how German lawyers would think, how German lawyers would solve a legal problem with German contracts. And the second problem is the compliance issues. And on the compliance side, there's not only GDPR and having the problem of like OpenAI, for example, just using your data for training, which is of course bad enough already, but we have also more specific national laws, and Nathalia can go also deeper into that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know that some of you will be lawyers for sure. I see that because those of us who are come here in like suits or ties usually are lawyers. So this is something I've discovered. Also guilty. So this is, I think, I'm allowed to say that. In terms of specific regulation, I think those who are not lawyers are sometimes not fully aware of the fact of like what confidential data means or what know-how means. Because confidential data, I think to many people would mean something that's like extra secretive or extra important, maybe governmental, but that's not really what it means in the law. Confidential data is already the name of our clients, not just what they told us or the information or the data they gave us, it's literally even their names. So I wouldn't be allowed to disclose any of my clients' name that I'm working with. So if you upload a contract, if you upload an email even, just the name that is in an email, all of that is confidential data, even if you wouldn't be able to gather from that who the specific person is. So it's not, if you speak German, it's not the same as personenbezogene Daten, for example, that like really goes into someone's birthday or so. It's like literally just the name of the client, even the company name. So all of this is confidential data for us as lawyers, and there's a lot of regulation in different countries as to like how this is to be treated. But in Germany, for example, specifically, there is a regulation that is not just for lawyers, but that's even part of the criminal code, which means if lawyers share their names, the names of their clients, with someone else, they can end up in prison. And sharing it would include uploading it to certain US clouds, for example, because of the way the regulation is set up. It's not quite the same with Europe, but for some firms, like our firm, CMS, we're the largest firm in Germany, and we, for example, would not put our client's name or any data that contains our client's name, even on the AWS cloud, even if the servers are physically located in Frankfurt, because they're the daughter company of Amazon, and Amazon is headquartered in the US, and so they fall under the US Cloud Act, and under certain circumstances, the US government could have access to the data. So just to say how severe this is.
Yeah, so how do we address these problems? So what we did essentially was training a separate on AI model for the legal space, which we called Noxtua. And we collaborate very, very closely with CMS on that side, and by now also already with multiple other law firms on very specific manners to collect and to build up a larger legal data set because, and Maria also mentioned that before, this data in Germany is just not published. There is no real big database or something that you can just crawl and train on. You have to build up your own data or partner with these databases. And we basically do both of that. So what we did originally was building up a proprietary data set together with CMS to label data, create all sorts of evaluation of clauses and so on and so on, to train the very first version of the model. And over time, multiple other law firms also joined this initiative, which we called Legal AI Alliance. So we have a bit of a framework around that to collaborate. And also, over time, more databases joined this initiative, like the Euro, for example, where we have access to a lot more data that is published in Germany, because only like a very tiny fraction of, for example, the court decisions are publicly available. So we need this collaboration, and we can only do it together in order to really train a model that is performant enough to act in Germany. And of course, also the topic of copyright is extremely important. We've heard that before as well. So we cannot just like walk around and just crawl everything that we can that we can grab. But we have to do it in a very compliant way and really only with companies together. Otherwise, also legal departments or law firms would not be so happy to use this model. So it's really developed together with lawyers, for lawyers in law firms and legal departments or government institutions. Nathalia will also go later a bit deeper into how we train that, because of course there's only a certain capability of like generating such data, and there's only like a certain amount also, even if you of data available, even if you partner with legal databases. So we have to, of course, also scale this up, and we'll talk later about how we do that. The second part is that we need, of course, a very, very, very strict compliance. So we did a long research of how to develop this solution for the German market, and considering especially the professional secrecy that has to be intact here. So we did this together with Deutsche Telekom. So Deutsche Telekom, and especially the Deutsche Telekom Cloud, or OTC, is right now the only one that also supports the paragraph 203 StGB for professional secrecy. So we deploy and hold everything in Magdeburg, together with them can provide this service as a basically pure German solution for the German market. Also, of course, we need all sorts of other certifications. So we went through multiple other ISO certifications and security audits, etc., etc. So there's a lot of things that we have to do on the compliance, plus that we operate everything in a fully encrypted manner and only in encrypted in-memory sessions, so that we don't hold any data of clients. We process them in a very small fraction of time and delete everything afterwards, so that we cannot see the data. We cannot use, of course, the data. We don't train on this data, and so on. And we have the guarantees of all of the partners involved here, like Deutsche Telekom and us, that this also happens in this compliant way. And another thing is the actuality, so that we can actually, because the model is much smaller than, for example, GPT-4 or so, which only gets trained on a basis of like twice a year or so, but we actually train this model very regularly and in an ongoing way. So we collect data all the time. We keep updated with a pipeline on the partner side. so that we don't miss out on any of those things. Like just as a brief look behind it on the technical side. So as I mentioned, so we develop basically this model, we deploy this model, we hold this model for certain scenarios. It can also, of course, run on premise. And we go later also a bit more into the training data side, how we generate that. Also, we developed a solution around it so that you can very easily use it, so that you can work with contracts in a very confidential way, that you can, we develop also templates with our partners so that you can, for example, apply it on specific scenarios very easily for checking specific contracts, for generating specific contracts, or also for legal research. And yeah. With that, I hand over to Nathalia.
Yes, thank you so much. So first of all, if we look at the two models that we're working with now in the legal sector, we have the language model, and then we have the research model, which will be coming out soon, which is already trained, which will also be quite interesting to see how different models can then focus on certain functions. But when we think about the language model, how we're training it has to do with what we want to see at the end, of course. And the question is, where do you actually want to use language models in legal work? Now, we're not working with an accuracy of 100%. We've already heard, I think by many others, why that is. And I see it every day at work. But nevertheless, even if we look at the legal cases that we can work and that we can look at with legal language models, we will still see that there's a variety of cases, I would say, on many different levels. So here's the basic level, which is sometimes we have contracts that are written for, say, a CEO, labor contract or different kind of contracts. And CEO is just an example of like a company. Some of these contracts can be 50, 70, 100 pages long on all sorts of topics. And then sometimes turns out the CEO is actually a woman, it's not a man. No one was aware of that possibility when they drafted it initially a few years ago. But now we're working with it and suddenly it's a woman. So we have to change the whole contract from he to she. This sounds really silly. It's not silly at all in the legal domain, because if we look at language, it really means that it's she and he, it's also the names, it's Mr. to Mrs., it's like her to him to her, etc., etc. So you have to go through what is being done right now is that people literally go through the whole contract, because again, they can't use many of the available language models out there because it doesn't contain confidential data. So it goes through the whole contract. They read an 80-page contract and they change it word for word. Everyone, this comes up. This sounds very silly, and it is very silly, but I just want to share with you that when we're talking about legally compliant language models, this is the most basic. Now, we've already reached a point where with Noxtua we can actually check NDAs and check SPAs, and that's like 5 steps above that. But even just this basic level would save so much money, I can promise. It's ridiculous how inefficient some of legal work is simply because of regulation and because of the way we have to do it currently. So how do we train this? One thing that we have that I think is very special is we can provide reinforcement learning. This is very special because try to find a really good lawyer, and you want a really good lawyer, obviously it makes a difference. Not every lawyer is excellent. Don't tell them, but this is just the truth. And also, some lawyers even make mistakes. It's true. It happens every once in a while. So you want to have excellent lawyers who are completely on it, who put in their best know-how, their best memos, their best commentaries, and for reinforcement learning, who really check the reply properly, right? Who don't just skim over it. How are you going to get them? If you look at the hourly rates, if you want to pay someone to do that at their hourly rates, this is not an actual model that you, I think, could use for that. But we, as a law firm, can obviously make our associates do it. So this is very exciting. So we have a reinforcement learning window that you can see here. We go through that. We put in the same prompts, or actually, you guys at Xayn put in the same prompts. And then we see the results, and then we can judge the results on a scale, and then also we give detailed feedback for each result. So if the prompt is, please draft a contract of the certain kind, please draft a clause, etc., then we can then correct the results. And this is done by specialized people on our different teams who are also aware of the fact that this is AI, who know what to look for. And I think this is something that I just want to stress. The next one is going to be a bit shorter, but I just want to stress this because I think reinforcement learning is something that in the legal domain is incredibly hard to come by. You're looking for someone who somewhat understands AI, who's really good at their field, and who's still willing to put in the hours, not at the usual hourly rates, right? And we do it because we believe in it. So for us, it's an investment in what we hope will revolutionize the legal market. So one thing that we can also do with Noxtua is NDA, DPA, SPA checks. And that's because NDAs, for example, are relatively standardized, and mostly it's about understanding the language. Obviously, there are certain terms that you want to know, but you can easily train them. So here you see one example that is very special, very, very important, especially for in-house legal departments. We don't really check NDAs so much at our firm, but in-house legal departments have that. I know some that have told me they have 10 people, full-time, fully qualified lawyers, who check NDAs full-time every day of the week, which is incredibly frustrating. The idea that someone has studied law to do that is, I think, unbelievable. And then there are other legal departments who say we don't have the resources or capacities to do that, so they don't check NDAs at all. Also not great. So with this tool, we're now able to check NDAs, which is really, really exciting. And this is something that's really good to train as well. You can do that with data and then put some reinforcement on it, so reinforcement learning on it. And then we also have a video in a second to show how this works specifically, but I think just one last thing I want to tell you before we look at the video is, to those of you who are not lawyers and who don't check these contracts all the time, what does it mean when a lawyer checks a contract? Quite often, lawyers actually do also have checklists. Quite often, it depends. We're not talking big M&A transaction, right? That's a bit of a due diligence, a bit of a different one. But if we look at SPAs, DPAs, we usually have a checklist, to be honest. That's what we do. We have a checklist that says, is the following regulated? Is there a clause on this? Is the clause kind of in line with what the law says? Is it in line with our interests, etc.? So this checklist is actually something that once you're aware of the fact that it's a checklist, you can really connect with AI with some know-how. And for this, and one final thought, and then we'll look at the video, is just that what's really exciting about this is that not only can you change the contract and check the contract according to and against the checklist, but you can then also redraft the bits that you want to have redrafted. So if you're like, thank you, that's great, but now in the contract, can you actually change the following clauses or make it a bit stricter, a bit longer, etc.? You can also have that redrafted, and it's completely fine with confidential data. And next, we have the video.
If it plays.
Yes. So what you see here is the chat. We already have some prompts in the background. You can also adjust the prompts to your needs and also put in your own chats, obviously, with this. You can upload your document, the one that you want to have checked. We already have the checklist uploaded in the background. You can upload your own checklist. Most in-house legal departments and law firms have their own checklist that they can place in the background, and then it's checked against the checklist. And then it will give out a whole table, as you can see here, with the number of the clause, the title of the clause, the content summary of the content of the clause, and then what it says in the checklist. And then you can also have one row or one column that is the checklist checked against this contract. So it can first give you a summary and say this is what's in the contract, this is what's on the checklist, this is the similarity, this is the difference. It also allows you to check if this is actually correct because it names the paragraph, the column that it got it from. And also because if you see the summary, you can already see if the summary actually makes sense. The summary of the checklist, for example, if you're like, yes, this is actually what's supposed to be checked here. And it can do that for the whole contract, which is, again, so useful because personally, somewhere along page 84 is where I have to take a break and have a coffee because my concentration is gone by that point. And I'm sure it's not just me. So this is really, really helpful because you can get a whole thing. We use that all the time. Literally just yesterday, I had a partner hit me up who had a template and wanted to connect that and compare that. So you can see how this does it. It does it for the whole document. It's incredibly fast. And then you have a result afterwards of things that doing this by hand would have taken hours to place them next to each other on the columns. So that's all I think we've brought here today with us.